Welcome to A Cup of Comfort with me, Trish Laub. This show is about care hero topics that nobody wants to talk about. Perhaps you tended to a younger sibling's cut finger or babysat a neighbor's child. Maybe you were thrown into the fire and became a care hero during a medical crisis. You may care for a parent, spouse, sibling, a child, or a friend, but the challenges are the same. Getting the tools you need to navigate the maze of unfamiliar options can be overwhelming. I know. I have been there. I didn't even know what I didn't know. I am here to help you with all of it. No care hero topic is off limits. I'm here to share with you concise, actionable information, as well as my fresh perspective about Alzheimer's and providing dignified care through the end of life for anyone with a life-altering diagnosis. So grab a cup of your favorite beverage, sit back, and let me help you on your care hero journey. We will talk and share, we may laugh, and we may share a tear or two. And we will always share a cup of comfort. Hi, everybody. I'm Trish Laub, and welcome to A Cup of Comfort with me. This is about you, the care hero. Whether you're new to the show today or have listened to some of the shows, I encourage you to visit the Care Hero radio page of my website, trishlaub.com. I've already covered several important care hero topics. So how many of you have already been challenged with the hearing of your loved one, possibly the loss of the hearing of your loved one? How about issues with hearing aids? Count me in. For years, my sisters and mom struggled as my dad's hearing became increasingly worse. I remember actually getting a headache from the volume of the TV while visiting them. My dad was not receptive to getting hearing aids as he really didn't want anyone to know that he needed them, and my mom was trying to delay the expense of purchasing them. So we did what we could, which included buying wireless speakers for the TV that we could place near my dad. It merely amplified the sound for him, but didn't really correct the problem. Eventually, my mom's hearing began to degrade. While she was really skilled at compensating for the hearing loss, my sisters and I finally realized that she was providing incorrect answers to questions we were asking and made comments that didn't apply to the current conversation. And it was not a cognitive issue. Does that sound familiar to any of you? It was a family wedding that made my mom take the steps for getting hearing aids for both of my parents. Simply, she wanted to be able to hear the vows and participate in the conversations at the reception. She proceeded without telling us, though. So this leads me to one of my all-time favorite memories. I arrived at my parents' condo one evening, and while I could barely see them, I noticed that both of my parents had hearing aids in their ears. I did not acknowledge it, as my mom was very private and my dad had already expressed concern that he didn't want anyone seeing them and knowing that he needed them. So after a few minutes talking with my parents, I excused myself from the room, walked down the very long hall to my parents' bedroom, and walked straight into their closet. I closed the door, conference called my sisters, and while telling them the news, did a happy dance around the closet. Yes, it is a fond memory. For the most part, my family and later caregivers assisted my parents with their hearing aids and maintenance. With my dad, who was living with Alzheimer's, it became a challenge in the later stage, as one time we actually found a hearing aid in his mouth. He had taken it out and later thought that it was a nut. And another time, one of his hearing aids took a trip through the washing machine. He had tucked it in his pocket, and miraculously it survived. I do not recommend that. We quickly learned things such as to take the hearing aids out before my parents got in the shower, and then we placed them in a special little box so that we remember where they were, they wouldn't get lost, and we remember to put them back in. We also learned that if they were napping, we should take the one out of the ear that they were laying on. Now, when I first announced that I would be hosting this show, the first and then most often request that I got to address was hearing loss and hearing aids, and I immediately knew who to call. My guest and I met when we were 12 years old, and we have been friends for a very long time. Now, before I introduce my guest, I want to remind everyone that much of the information from today's show and some supplemental information will be available in a downloadable PDF on the Care Hero radio page of my website. That's Trish Laub, Laub as in boy.com, after the show. Cathe Russe owns and runs a private practice hearing health business focused on providing customized solutions for those with hearing issues. She is also the co-founder and principal of Solstice Group, a specialty coaching firm dedicated to transforming people's lives, team performance, and organizational culture. Before embarking on this entrepreneurial venture in 2004, Cathe spent nearly 3 decades as an academic at Johns Hopkins University, a management consultant with Booz Allen Hamilton, and in inline and staff positions at Baxter Healthcare and Nestle. Welcome, Cathe. Any opportunity to talk to you is always a pleasure.
And mine too. It's so great to see you.
Old friends, not old, just longtime friends.
Longtime friends.
So, how did we get from going to middle school and high school together to you ending up involved in a hearing health business?
Oh, what a long path, right? And in so many things in life, serendipity played a huge part in that for me. About 15 years ago, I decided to leave the corporate world. And while I was considering what my next steps would look like, an opportunity to own and run a hearing business just sort of fell into my lap. I did not have any background in hearing health, but I did know the healthcare industry pretty well. What I did have was a background in marketing and new product development, sales training, and consultative selling. And back in the day, consultative selling was all about a very customer-centric orientation, where you designed solutions based on the customer's need. And that's what I brought into the work that I do at Sound Hearing Solutions. It's all customer-focused.
Somehow it sounds like somehow all of your previous experiences just kind of rolled up into something that made that work.
You know, I think you're right. You never know what you're ready for until it sort of lands in your lap. And you certainly see that as a care hero, right? I didn't set out to know about hearing health, but I will say that it has been a wonderful journey for me because I see the type of help that we're able to provide, not just to the individual, but also to their families.
Yes. And I know, I've in the news more and more, I see the connection between hearing health and a variety of different illnesses and diseases. So when you and I initially talked about this show, you had brought up, or this episode of the show, you had brought up some of the psychosocial impacts of hearing loss. And I would love for you to share that with the listeners today.
Sure. One of the things that I found years ago was a quote that was from Helen Keller. And it really, to me, is so valuable for us to understand it. And what she said was that blindness separates people from things. Deafness separates people from people. So just think about that. If I cannot hear, I cannot be connected to you. And so I think we all know people who have hearing loss, and we can see firsthand that that's true. And we can see how hard someone with hearing loss is working to stay connected. But there are times that work is so challenging that they can kind of give up. So let me back up a little bit and just give you some context, some perspective. First of all, hearing loss is the most common condition that affects older adults. 25% of everyone who is 65 to 75 years old have disabling hearing loss. 50% of everyone over 75 has a disabling hearing loss. Most of those people have not sought care for their hearing loss for a lot of reasons, but certainly there is tremendous stigma around losing your hearing, right? And you talked a little bit about that with your own parents. They didn't want to admit it. And yet once they crossed that threshold, they were able to stay more connected. So that was a great success story on that one. But if you think about what happens when you can't hear, it really can make it hard to hear what your doctor's saying. It can make it hard to hear any kind of an alarm or a doorbell. And it makes it extremely hard to enjoy talking with your friends and family. You know, you're still working at being in it, But when it's that much work, it's hard to enjoy. And we want for our loved ones to be enjoying, right? The other thing that happens is that a lot of people will stereotype older adults that have hearing loss, and they kind of think of them as slow or not with it, right? And just imagine if you are on the receiving end of that stereotype and you kind of internalize it, it could lead to some really negative self-perceptions. And those self-perceptions end up having emotional consequences. So when the effort of hearing becomes too great, it's really common for an older adult to retreat from social contacts and to become isolated. And that can become a vicious cycle. In addition, there are repeated studies out there, really strong studies that show that untreated hearing loss increases the risk of dementia and cognitive decline. It also increases the risk of social isolation, which can lead to depression and anxiety. So when we see evidence of hearing loss, it's really time to stop and think about how can we get it checked out for that person.
Right. As you mentioned, my parents before, I mentioned that, we could tell by the TV, and we could, we realized that my mom was not answering the right questions, or she was giving answers that did not apply to the questions we asked. Are there other things that are indicative that there might be a problem?
Yes, there are so many. And maybe the starting point is really to be careful observers, right? Yeah. So not to make assumptions, but really observe what it is that's going on when you're interacting with that person. You talked about one of your parents giving an illogical response. It's very common because we don't want to say, I don't know. But also, people will ask others to repeat themselves. And while all of us do that, you'll see that that's done more often with someone who has disabling hearing loss. The other thing that'll happen is people will just withdraw from conversations. They'll sort of wander off and not be thinking about it. And so as we're observing them, we might think that they're distracted, or we might think that they're not paying attention. But really what they've done is they've chosen to check out because it's so hard for them to stay engaged. And so what we're looking for is any kinds of signals that are showing that people are beginning to pull away. And your loved one, what their normal behavior is like. And so we sort of put it in context with what do we know about that person? And is the behavior that you're experiencing different than maybe it was a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? So we have to be just really astute observers.
I love that you say that, because that's so true. As care heroes, we have to observe everything to see the little things that begin to change. Mm-hmm. So I want to move on to hearing aids, and I think there's an elephant in the room.
Well, there are elephants around hearing aids. There's no doubt about it. And really the biggest one is probably cost. But if I was going to stop and think about what do people need to think about when they're considering hearing aids, cost is one of them. But there are two others that are really critical as well. One is lifestyle, and the other one is who is your clinician. But since the elephant is cost, let's just stay there for a moment. Because what I can tell you is that hearing aids are mini computers, very sophisticated computers. And while the technology has made great strides in the last 10 to 15 years, the stigma hasn't gone away, right? So what we know is that these little computers that we stick in our ears are all about boosting sound volume, filtering out extraneous noise, and programming to address a person's particular needs. So it's not just about volume. So let me give you just an example out of something that I think most of us can relate to, and that is eyeglasses. If you think about eyeglasses, right? I don't have mine on right now, but Normally, I wear progressive lenses. If you think about your eyes and you decide that, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I need readers, it's really easy. You can self prescribe. You can go off and get them off the shelf, and you just get, 1.5, 1.75, right? You're really just magnifying the words on the page. And that's really similar to what happens if you're just boosting the volume. But most people's hearing loss is not volume directed. It's around word discrimination and sound discrimination. So words that sound similar, I can't tell the difference between flight and fight. I'm going to hear them as the same word. So when we say word discrimination, that's what we're talking about. So if all we cared about was volume, we could go and just get a hearing aid off the shelf. But that's not the way it works. It's really more like progressive lenses, and you are looking for a computer that can help direct the sound, filter sound, and help you with word recognition. So that's how I would think about a hearing aid. It is extremely expensive, but there's a reason that it's expensive. The other thing is that I would encourage people to purchase the most expensive hearing aid they can afford, because it makes the difference between staying connected and not staying connected. Hearing the young voices, right? It's always the high voices that are hardest to hear, women's voices and children, but those are ones that bring so much joy also. And then the last thing I would suggest is that people really work hard at choosing their audiologist. You have to choose your audiologist carefully. These are doctorate trained clinicians. They become a part of your care team. So you have a lot of people on that care team. That audiologist is critical because they remain vital to your hearing health long after the purchase. They're going to be doing the adjustments to that hearing aid. They're going to be cleaning the hearing aid for you. And so you want very much to have somebody who becomes your advocate and you have a strong relationship with. So remember that hearing aids are really an investment in your loved one's health. And it can take time for them to get used to them. So it may require some patience and encouragement on your part as you're helping them work through adjustments.
Well, so interesting you chose the analogy to glasses, because I'm kind of smiling here. I mean, I went through that conversation with my mom. I said, you needed glasses. We went and got glasses. And Dad wears glasses. And how is this any different? But you're right. There is a stigma around it. And it took a family wedding to make it important enough. My mom did not want to miss the vows of her granddaughter, and the conversation, I think she knew she wanted the right answers at the receptions. So I love that analogy and Helen Keller's quote on that too.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story too. So you have this live experience of why we want to keep people connected. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think probably anybody out there who has dealt with this issue has probably dealt with the person denying that they're having a hard time hearing. Do you have any suggestions for us?
First, I'm just going to say that that's very common. We think about any transitions we've had in our lives. Sometimes we don't go to them easily. So we have to first just remember that it's the human condition. And then I think the second is that it's really important that we are gentle in our conversation and we take time. And when I say that, we can't run into that conversation with an agenda. We need to seek first to understand what they're experiencing and then to share what we have to say. And that really comes out of Stephen Covey's work many years ago. But seek first to understand and then to be understood. And when I think of that, the way I imagine that conversation happening is, we start talking about, how are things going? Oh, you saw your friend Carol. How did that go? Oh, you were at church yesterday. How was it at church? So you begin to pull from them what their experience is, and let them tell you their experience instead of us telling them what our experience is of what's happening with them. So the first one is really to be very gentle. And the second one is to be empathic. When I think about this, we have to remember that this is a loss. And somebody is feeling not just a physical loss, but it's an emotional loss as well. And so if we can remember that, it might help us support them in the adjustment that they need in accepting their hearing loss. This is going to sound terrible, but the average time between diagnosis and someone seeking to buy a hearing aid is 7 years. So that means that people are walking away from learning that they have the hearing loss, and on average, it's taking them 7 years to take action. So your mom and dad were not at all unusual. I don't know how long it took, but their willingness, it took a little while to get there. So I think we kind of have to look at that as well. And then the last thing that I would say, when somebody's in denial, you really want to take them to a great clinician. They're seeing other clinicians for other issues that they have. Audiologists are doctorate trained professionals, and they know everything about hearing loss and what the options are out there that might help somebody. So I would encourage anybody who's having that conversation with their loved one who is denying it to kind of gently go in and say, well, let's just go find out a little bit and learn what there is to know. We don't have to make any decisions, but we can have information.
I think that's really important to understand, that they're doctorate level trained, and it's important to have somebody really good at their job, as in any field. You want, if it's a medical doctor, that you want the best one in their field. And I think that's really important. I want to just take a second here to make sure that people know how they can find you, reach out to you, and I'll let you tell them that. And then I have a comment about that.
Sure. So if you want more information about hearing health, you can reach us through www.soundhearingsolutions.com. There's a website there. There's lots of information, and you can certainly connect with us through that.
And the note I want to add to that is I've spent a lot of time on that website, and it's a great resource. There's a blog there. You can connect to a blog of a group of ENTs. It's got great articles, answers a lot of the questions. And so I just encourage you to go there, as well as a lot of the information that Cathe's gone over. And a couple questions we didn't get to are in the PDF that you can download. So while Cathe was here today to share her knowledge about hearing health, I want to share just for a few minutes a bit more about her other work with Solstice Group. And Solstice is spelled SOULSTICE Group.
Yes.
I often talk and write about having gone to a workshop in February of 2017 with the clear objective of talking me out of doing the work that I now do. I don't know if I failed at my goal or if the workshop was that powerful, which I think it's the latter, that I left ready to start Comfort in Their Journey. And the workshop is one of many offered by Cathe and her co-founder partner through Solstice Group. So for me, it was a life-changing event experience. So check it out at www.solstice, that's SOULSTICE group.com. And the contact info is also in the downloadable PDF. Yeah. So I want to thank you, Cathe, for joining me today to share such great information. And I know this information will help many. The downloadable PDF for today's show has information that Cathe went over, as well as supplemental information, because this is a big topic. And it'll be on the Care Hero radio page of trishleib.com. So thank you, Cathe. It's been a pleasure, and we'll talk later.
Thank you so much.
Well, hopefully we can have you back for some other topics. You've got a variety of skills. So,
well, it would be a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right.
And I want to thank all of you out there today for tuning in and sharing this time with me. There is much, much more to come, and I would love to hear from you. Reach out to me with questions, comments, topics you want to hear about, or share your story with me. I already have a couple of people that have shared their story. One of them is booked as a guest on this as a Care Hero moment to share her story. So go to the Care Hero radio page of my website, trishlaub.com, and fill out the contact form or email me at info@trishlaub.com and let me know where you're listening from. I'm just really curious. So while you're there, download the PDFs for the shows. They're available for every show that's already been on, and sign up for my newsletter. Join me the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month at 12 Pacific and 3 Eastern. So this one is very important. Next time on February 9th, I'll meet you here with a special guest. We'll have a conversation about the misunderstood and often emotionally charged topics that people are reticent to talk about. And I promised no topics off limits, and we're here to talk about topics nobody wants to talk about. Next show on February 9th, it's about palliative care, hospice care, and death with dignity in the United States. Certified physician assistant Sky O'Neill will provide clarity not only on what these services offer, but we'll also discuss when, how, and why to consider these choices. And I just want to take a second to tell you a couple of the topics coming up: a different kind of Care Hero experience, wound care considerations, some experiential alternative therapies, and as I said, a personal story of a Care Hero that listens just like all of you do. So until next time, remember that you are someone's Care Hero. Thank you for listening to A Cup of Comfort with me, Trish Laub, and for your Care Hero courage. Tune in next time on Transformation Talk Radio as we explore life-changing Care Hero topics to assist you on your journey. In the meantime, I would love to hear any tips or insights that you've taken away with you today. So head on over to trishlaub.com. That's Trish Laub, L-A-U-B as in boy.com, and leave a comment, a question you would like answered, or a topic you'd like to hear about in the future. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to my newsletter. So raise a cup and let's toast to all the amazing Care Heroes out there giving it their all. Until next time, remember that you are true heroes.
Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its management, or advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.